Here's something that might genuinely shock you. The more you try to be the perfect man for a woman, the faster you can lose her. I know that goes against everything you've been taught. From movies to social media to well-meaning advice from friends, men are constantly told the same thing. Give more, try harder, prove yourself, sacrifice everything, chase her. And while that sounds romantic on the surface, it quietly destroys three things: attraction, respect, and your own confidence. This is not about disrespecting women. This is not about manipulation or games. This is about understanding the real psychology of attraction and recognizing that many men are not failing in relationships because of lack of effort. They're failing because they're putting effort in completely the wrong direction. There's a massive difference. This is Liza from Secrets Inside the Mind, and today I'm breaking down 7 things men should never do for women. Not because women are the enemy, but because these behaviors quietly communicate the one thing that kills attraction faster than anything else: desperation. If you've ever done everything right and still lost her, subscribe right now, because this video reveals the psychological truth behind why certain behaviors, even kind, well-intentioned ones, actually destroy attraction. Keep watching until the end, because the final point is the one most men discover too late, and it changes everything. Before we get into the 7 specific behaviors, you need to understand the foundational psychological principle that makes all of them so damaging when combined. From a psychological perspective, attraction is not a transaction.
You cannot earn desire the way you earn a paycheck. You cannot accumulate enough good behavior, enough gifts, enough attention, enough sacrifice, and have it convert automatically into attraction and respect. This is the fundamental misunderstanding that causes men to overgive, overchase, and oversacrifice while watching attraction evaporate in real time. Here's the psychological reality. Attraction is deeply connected to confidence, boundaries, self-respect, and independence. When a man abandons those things in order to please a woman, he may believe he's being loving. But what he's communicating at a psychological level is insecurity, a fear of losing her that overrides his own sense of self-worth. That communication changes the dynamic. Because once the dynamic shifts, once she senses that you need her more than she needs you, respect begins to quietly erode. That kind of grounded strength is what generates genuine respect and sustained attraction. The 7 things I'm about to share are not about becoming cold or distant. They're about understanding which behaviors quietly signal psychological weakness and replacing them with the kind of grounded self-respect that makes you genuinely attractive rather than desperately accommodating. Section 2, Thing 1, making her the center of your entire world. The first thing men should never do is make a woman the center of their entire world, and this is the mistake that feels most romantic while it's happening, which is exactly why it's so damaging. Here's how it unfolds psychologically. You meet her, you're attracted, you start spending more time with her, you text throughout the day, you cancel previous plans to see her, the gym visits drop, the business idea gets shelved, your friends see less of you, your hobbies slowly disappear. Everything reorganizes around her schedule, her mood, her availability. You believe you're showing commitment. What you're actually doing is shrinking your own life. And from a psychological standpoint, that shrinking communicates something specific. She has become your mission, your direction, your primary source of meaning and emotional fulfillment. Here's the psychological problem with that dynamic. Attraction grows when 2 complete people come together, not when one person gradually disappears into the other. A woman is naturally drawn to a man who has direction, who is building something, who has passions and friendships and discipline, and a life that feels full with or without her presence. When you give all of that up, you remove the very qualities that made you interesting in the first place. Think about this carefully. If she met you when you were ambitious, focused, social, and driven, and then 6 months later you're always available, always adjusting, always waiting, the dynamic has changed fundamentally. Mystery fades. Respect can quietly drop. The excitement of being with someone who has momentum gives way to the weight of being someone's only source of fulfillment. Here's the deeper psychological reality. When you make someone your entire emotional focus, you place enormous pressure on them. They become responsible for your happiness. Your mood depends on their texts. Your confidence depends on their attention. Your peace requires their approval. That's not romantic. Psychologically, it's heavy. And no one, regardless of how much they care about you, wants to feel like they are the only thing sustaining another person's emotional well-being. From a practical standpoint, this mistake often looks like canceling important commitments because she's suddenly available. Staying up late when you have early responsibilities because she wants to talk. Letting your physical discipline, your professional development, and your friendships slowly compress under the weight of her schedule. And here's the psychological paradox. At first, she may enjoy the attention. It feels flattering, but over time, something subtle shifts. She notices you don't have much going on outside of her. You're always free, you're always waiting, you're always prioritizing her, and that constant availability psychologically reduces your perceived value, not because she's calculating, but because scarcity communicates value at a subconscious level. When your time feels abundant and unconditional, it stops feeling precious. The solution is not emotional distance or manufactured unavailability. The solution is maintaining your actual life. Keep going to the gym. Keep working on your goals. Keep your friendships intact. Protect your routines. When she sees that you genuinely value your own time and development, she's far more likely to value it too. A woman should be an important part of your life, never the only part. The right woman is attracted to the man you are, not the man who erased himself trying to keep her. Section 3. Thing 2. Constantly seeking her validation. The second thing men should never do is constantly seek a woman's validation, and most men won't admit this is happening because it doesn't feel like validation seeking, it feels like caring what she thinks. But there's a crucial psychological distinction between valuing your partner's perspective and depending on her approval to feel good about yourself. That line is where the problem begins. Here's what validation seeking looks like in real behavior. You tell a story and immediately scan her face to see if she's impressed. You make a decision, then second guess it until she approves. You change your opinion mid-conversation when you sense she disagrees. You fish for compliments by downplaying yourself to see if she corrects you. None of these seem dramatic in isolation, but collectively, they send a consistent psychological message. Nah, I'm not sure I'm enough unless you confirm it. From a psychological standpoint, that message weakens attraction. Not because she wants you to be arrogant or dismissive of her perspective, but because emotional steadiness signals strength. A man who knows who he is without needing constant confirmation feels genuinely secure, and genuine security is deeply attractive in a way that validation seeking simply can't replicate. Here's another psychological dimension of this pattern. When you constantly look to her for approval, the dynamic shifts. She starts feeling like the authority in the relationship, the judge, the emotional center that your confidence orbits around. And that imbalance, where she holds the psychological power and you're perpetually seeking her confirmation, quietly changes how she perceives you. There's also something important about how this pattern affects authenticity. Over time, men who constantly seek validation start adjusting themselves to fit her reactions. You dress differently because she prefers it. You stop mentioning certain interests because she teased you about them. You hesitate before expressing a genuine opinion that might create tension. Each adjustment seems small, but cumulatively, you're gradually replacing yourself with a version designed to minimize her disapproval. That's not adaptation. That's disappearance. And when you disappear, when she can no longer find the original man she was attracted to beneath the layers of accommodation, attraction loses its foundation. The psychological shift required here is this. Validation should be a bonus, never a requirement. When you're genuinely grounded in who you are, when your confidence is self-generated rather than dependent on her reactions, you stop performing. You stop overanalyzing. You stop adjusting constantly. You simply show up as yourself. And that authentic self-possession is far more attractive than any amount of approval-seeking behavior. Section 4. Thing 3. Ignoring red flags because of attraction. The third thing men should never do is ignore red flags because they're attracted. And this is where honest self-reflection becomes genuinely uncomfortable. Most men don't get hurt because they were unlucky. They get hurt because they ignored what was right in front of them. Attraction can blind you. Chemistry can distract you. Physical beauty can make you overlook behavior that would immediately concern you in any other context. And when that happens, you start constructing justifications instead of paying attention to reality. You see signs, but tell yourself it's nothing. You notice disrespect, but call it just her personality. You feel genuinely uneasy, but silence that feeling because you don't want to lose her. You observe inconsistent behavior that keeps you anxious, but convince yourself it's temporary. Here's the psychological truth about this pattern. When something feels wrong early in a connection, it almost always is. Not because you should be paranoid or over-analytical about minor imperfections. Everyone has bad days, everyone carries history. But because there's a fundamental difference between normal human complexity and consistent warning signs. From a psychological standpoint, consistent patterns reveal character far more accurately than individual moments. If she repeatedly disrespects you in small ways, if she plays games with communication and availability, if she tests your boundaries persistently, if her behavior keeps you in a state of low-level anxiety, that's not something to rationalize away. That's information, and yet men ignore it for predictable psychological reasons. Fear of starting over, aversion to temporary loneliness, the sunk cost of time and emotional investment already given, the hope that with enough patience she'll become the person she showed glimpses of in the beginning. But hope is not a strategy. You cannot build a strong relationship on potential. You build it on consistent patterns. And patterns reveal who someone actually is beneath the chemistry and the early excitement. Here's something psychologically important that most men don't recognize in themselves. You stay in situations that drain you because you're attached to how she makes you feel in the good moments. The highs are genuinely high. The attention feels validating. The chemistry is intense. But when the lows come, the disrespect, the coldness, the manipulation, you tolerate them because you're chasing the return of those highs. That cycle is not love. Psychologically, it's a pattern of intermittent reinforcement that can become genuinely addictive, where the unpredictability itself keeps you more engaged than consistent kindness ever could. The practical psychological principle here is, believe the patterns, not the promises. If she says she respects you, but consistently dismisses your opinions, believe the behavior. If she apologizes but repeats the same thing, believe the repetition. Actions across time are the only honest data you have. And here's the connection to self-respect. When you ignore red flags, you're often communicating to yourself and to her that you don't believe you deserve better, that you'd rather tolerate dysfunction than risk the temporary discomfort of being alone. A man with genuine self-respect walks away from consistent disrespect. Not dramatically, not aggressively, but firmly and with dignity. Section 5. Thing 4. Abandoning your standards to keep her. The fourth thing men should never do is abandon their standards to keep a woman. And this is one of the most psychologically self-defeating behaviors in dating because it feels like flexibility and tolerance while it's happening. But it functions as the gradual erosion of everything that made you attractive. From a psychological standpoint, standards are not limitations that push women away. They're the behavioral expression of self-respect. When you have genuine standards, things you actually won't tolerate, values you actually live by, expectations you consistently maintain, and you hold them calmly without apology, you create psychological respect. But here's what abandoning standards looks like in practice. You tolerate disrespect because you're afraid of the conflict that addressing it would cause. You laugh at things that genuinely bother you because you don't want to seem sensitive. You agree with opinions you don't hold because disagreement feels risky. You cancel your important commitments whenever she wants attention because disappointing her feels worse than disappointing yourself. Each individual compromise seems small, but the cumulative psychological message they send is enormous. I will reshape myself around your preferences to avoid losing you. And that message, that willingness to shrink without limit, is one of the most reliable attraction killers in relationship psychology. Here's the psychological paradox that most men miss. The very act of maintaining your standards, even when it creates friction, generates the kind of respect that makes genuine attraction sustainable. Not because conflict is attractive in itself, but because a man who holds his ground calmly communicates something essential. He has a core that doesn't bend under social pressure. He knows what he values, and he lives by it consistently. Women don't always consciously recognize this dynamic, but they feel it. They feel the difference between a man who gradually accommodates everything and a man who engages warmly and genuinely while maintaining a clear sense of what he will and won't accept. The psychological solution is not to become rigid or demanding. It's to identify your genuine standards, the things that actually matter to your well-being, your self-respect, and your values, and maintain them calmly and consistently, regardless of whether it creates temporary discomfort in the relationship. Section 6. Thing 5. Chasing her when she pulls back. The fifth thing men should never do is chase a woman when she pulls back. And this is perhaps the most instinctive of all the behaviors, which is exactly why it's so psychologically costly. Here's the psychological mechanism. She becomes less available. She responds more slowly. Her enthusiasm seems reduced. Something has shifted, and your instinctive response is to close the gap, to text more, reach out more, be more available, be more affectionate, be more demonstrably invested. From a psychological standpoint, this response makes complete intuitive sense. The connection feels like it's retreating, and you're trying to pull it back before it disappears. But here's what that chasing behavior communicates at a psychological level. Her distance controls your behavior. Her approval determines your actions. You are more invested in the connection than she is, and you're willing to demonstrate that disproportion openly. And that demonstration is psychologically catastrophic for attraction. Because when you chase someone who is pulling back, you confirm two things simultaneously. That you were already overinvested before the distance occurred, and that her withdrawal is an effective way of generating your pursuit. Both of these confirmations reduce your perceived value and increase hers. Here's the Stoic psychological principle that applies directly. You cannot control her emotional state, her level of engagement, or her decision about whether to invest in the connection. What you can control is your own behavior, and the psychologically sound response to her distance is not pursuit. It's maintaining your own life and allowing space for her to return if she chooses to. This is not about playing games or creating artificial distance. It's about the genuine psychological reality that chasing communicates dependency. And dependency is never attractive. The man who continues living his life when she pulls back, who doesn't panic, doesn't double text, doesn't seek reassurance, is communicating something genuinely powerful. His emotional equilibrium doesn't require her consistent engagement to remain stable. Section 7, Thing 6, Over-explaining and over-apologizing. The sixth thing men should never do is over-explain and over-apologize. And this one is particularly damaging because it's often disguised as emotional maturity and consideration, when psychologically it's often the opposite. From a psychological standpoint, a genuine apology when you've genuinely caused harm is not only appropriate, it's an expression of character. But over-apologizing, saying sorry for simply having a different opinion, for being unavailable at a particular moment, for having needs of your own, for making reasonable choices she doesn't prefer, communicates psychological insecurity rather than emotional intelligence. Here's what over-explaining looks like. She asks why you didn't respond for a few hours, and you provide a detailed account of your entire afternoon to justify the silence. She seems slightly unhappy about something, and you immediately apologize before even understanding what the issue is. She disagrees with the choice you've made, and you launch into an extended defense of your reasoning, as though you need her to officially find your decision acceptable before you can feel confident in it. The psychological message beneath all of these behaviors is the same. Your approval of my choices is required for me to feel at peace with them. And when that message is consistently communicated, it hands her enormous psychological authority over your internal experience. A man who is genuinely confident in his choices doesn't need to sell them. He doesn't campaign for approval. He makes decisions based on his own values and judgment, explains himself briefly and directly when asked, and doesn't collapse emotionally if she disagrees. That psychological self-possession, the quiet certainty of a man who knows his own mind, is far more attractive than the anxious thoroughness of a man trying to preemptively defend himself from judgment. Section 8. Thing 7. Sacrificing your identity to become what she wants. The seventh and most fundamental thing men should never do is sacrifice their identity to become what they think she wants. This is where all the previous 6 behaviors ultimately converge, because they're all expressions of the same underlying psychology. I will reshape who I am to secure her attraction and prevent losing her. From a psychological standpoint, this identity sacrifice is the most self-defeating of all the behaviors because it destroys the very thing that attraction was originally built on. She was attracted to who you were. When you gradually replace that person with a version designed specifically to please her, when your interests, your opinions, your habits, your standards all compress under the pressure of trying to fit her preferences, you remove the foundation of her original attraction. And here's what's psychologically devastating about this pattern. It doesn't happen dramatically. It happens through accumulation. A small compromise here, a suppressed opinion there, a hobby quietly dropped, a friendship gradually deprioritized, an ambition shelved because it doesn't fit the life she prefers. Each individual sacrifice seems minor, but over months, the man she's with is fundamentally different from the man she was attracted to. And she can feel that difference even if she can't articulate it. Here's the psychological reality most men resist accepting. The right woman for you will be attracted to who you actually are, not a carefully curated version of yourself designed to minimize her disapproval. When you pretend to be someone you're not, even with the best intentions, you create 2 problems simultaneously. You attract someone who isn't actually compatible with your real self, and you build a relationship on a foundation that requires constant performance to maintain. Okay. From a Stoic psychological perspective, the ultimate form of male strength is not the ability to change yourself for someone else. It's the ability to know yourself so completely that you don't feel the need to. When you're genuinely secure in who you are, your values, your standards, your direction, your identity, you naturally attract people who are compatible with that reality, and you naturally filter out people who require you to be someone fundamentally different. Section 9, the psychology of self-respect, the foundation of everything. Now that we've covered all 7 behaviors, let me bring them together under the single psychological principle that explains why all of them are damaging: the absence of genuine self-respect. From a psychological standpoint, every behavior on this list, making her the center of your world, seeking constant validation, ignoring red flags, abandoning standards, chasing when she pulls back, over-explaining and over-apologizing, sacrificing your identity, all of them share the same psychological root. They're all expressions of a man who values keeping her around more than he values maintaining his own psychological integrity. And here's what the psychology of attraction consistently reveals. People are drawn to self-respect, not arrogance, not aggression, not emotional unavailability. Genuine self-respect, the kind that expresses itself through maintained standards, calm boundary enforcement, continued personal development, and the quiet confidence of a man who knows he'll be fine regardless of any single relationship outcome. When you genuinely respect yourself, the behaviors on this list become psychologically impossible to maintain. You can't make her the center of your world when your own purpose is genuinely engaging. You can't seek her validation when your confidence is authentically self-generated. You can't ignore red flags when you genuinely believe you deserve to be treated well. You can't abandon your identity when it's strong enough to withstand external pressure. Self-respect is not something you perform. It's something you build through consistent discipline, through maintaining your standards even when it's uncomfortable, through choosing your long-term psychological integrity over short-term emotional comfort. Final section, the psychological truth. Most men discover too late. Here's the final psychological honesty that most content in this space avoids because it's uncomfortable. If you keep losing women or finding yourself in relationships that slowly drain you, the patterns behind it are almost always within your control to change. It's easier to externalize. To say women are unpredictable or that good men finish last or that dating is broken, that narrative is emotionally comfortable. It removes responsibility, but it also removes power. Because if the problem is entirely external, you have no ability to change the outcome. The psychological reality is this: women respond to confidence, self-respect, emotional stability, and purpose. When those qualities are genuinely present, attraction follows naturally. When they're absent, when they're replaced by overgiving, validation-seeking, red flag tolerance, standard abandonment, chasing, over-explaining, and identity sacrifice, attraction erodes predictably. That's not a judgment, that's psychology. And psychology is something you can understand, internalize, and use to genuinely change your patterns. Here's what changes when you stop doing these 7 things. You stop panicking when she pulls back because your emotional equilibrium doesn't require her constant engagement. You stop collapsing when she disagrees because your confidence is self-generated rather than borrowed from her approval. You stop tolerating behavior that drains you because your self-respect is genuine rather than conditional.
You stop losing yourself because your identity is strong enough to remain intact through the pressures of relationship dynamics. And here's the final psychological paradox that brings everything together. When you stop needing her to stay, you become genuinely worth staying for. Not because you've learned tactics or manufactured emotional distance, but because you've become psychologically whole. And wholeness is the most attractive quality a man can possess, because it communicates that he's choosing you from abundance, not clinging to you from scarcity. That's the shift, from seeking selection to being genuinely selectable, from trying to earn her attraction to becoming someone whose presence is genuinely worth investing in. The right woman will not want you because you sacrificed yourself for her. She will want you because you never did. If this video gave you genuine psychological clarity, comment below right now.
Be honest about which of these 7 things you've been doing. Tell me which one has cost you the most. Subscribe to Secrets Inside the Mind because understanding the psychology of attraction, self-respect, and genuine masculine confidence is what changes real outcomes, not just in dating, but in how you experience yourself in every significant relationship in your life. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.